All right, so think about this for a second.
Okay.
Your whole world, everyone you know, your whole culture, it all revolves around worshiping the moon.
Hmm.
Like it's the ultimate power, right? The giver of light in the darkness.
Right.
Then all of a sudden someone tells you, hey, it's just a rock, just hanging up there, put there by someone else, completely different. Could you imagine?
It would be a huge shift in thinking.
A total mental earthquake.
Totally.
Well, that kind of seismic shift, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Oh, wow.
We're going way back, about 4,000 years to around 2000 BC.
Okay.
To explore the story of Abram, who you might know better as Abraham. This
Right.
guy is pivotal. He makes a massive leap of faith, leaving behind moon worship in the sophisticated city of Ur
Wow.
to follow a new, unseen God.
You know, it's so fascinating how these ancient stories, these narratives in the Bible, they really connect with what we know about history, about that time period.
Oh, for sure.
We've got these sources that detail God's interactions with Abram, these promises that were truly life-changing.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they paint this picture of what the world was like back then, especially in places like Ur and Haran, moon worship. It wasn't just something people did. It was like completely woven into their society.
Right, like totally ingrained.
Totally. And you see this shift in the biblical narrative from these broad events after the Tower of Babel
Yeah.
to this super focused look at one man and his journey.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, our mission on this deep dive, it's to really grasp the significance of what it meant when God called Abram.
Right.
Like, what did that really mean for him? We want to get to the heart of those promises.
Yeah.
The land, descendants, a blessing for everyone.
Huge promises.
And we'll trace those crucial first steps that he took.
It's incredible.
Because it's a story about personal upheaval.
Definitely.
About incredibly courageous faith.
Oh, yeah.
And the very beginning of this brand new chapter in history.
I think to understand all that, we need to kind of step back for a minute and think about the world after the Tower of Babel.
Okay.
The narrative suggests this widespread turning away from the Creator,
Right.
and humanity is drawn to worshiping created things instead, especially the celestial bodies.
Like the stars, the moon, the sun.
Exactly.
They become objects of worship.
Yeah, and this is especially true in Mesopotamia.
Right. That area that's like modern-day Iraq and parts of Iran and Turkey.
Right, right.
And that whole region was a major center for worshiping celestial bodies.
It was, with moon worship especially prominent.
And that brings us to Ur of the Chaldeans.
Ah,
And our sources describe it as this really cultured and influential city right on the Euphrates River.
Oh, yeah, and picture this. Dominating the skyline is this massive ziggurat,
Wow.
a temple dedicated to Sin, the moon god.
So this wasn't just some fringe group.
No way. This was mainstream religion in Ur.
And right in the middle of this is Terah, Abram's father,
Living in Ur, a moon worshiper himself.
with his 3 sons.
Abram, Nahor, and Haran.
And don't forget Abram's wife, Sarai, who couldn't have children.
Oh, that's a crucial detail, especially when we talk about the promises of descendants.
Absolutely.
And Haran also had a son, Lot, who becomes a big part of Abram's story later on.
Right. Okay, so we've got the family.
Yep.
Now it gets interesting.
What's that?
Why would they leave Ur? It was established, sophisticated, everything you could want, right?
Hey, good point.
The sources tell us that their plan was to go to Canaan,
Right.
but they stopped in Haran
Which is fascinating.
because Haran was another major center for moon worship.
It was.
And it's actually in Haran that Terah dies,
It really makes you wonder why they stopped there.
doesn't it?
Was it just about sticking with what they knew, staying in their comfort zone, another moon-worshipping city?
Yeah, maybe.
Or could there be something more going on, like God's timing?
Interesting.
Like maybe Abram needed to be in Haran until his father passed away.
You know, to fully break from those old ways, those religious influences.
Exactly.
And there's actually this later account in the book of Joshua,
Right.
written like 600 years later.
Wow.
And it specifically says that Terah and his ancestors worshipped other gods beyond the Euphrates River.
So their background was steeped in polytheism.
Oh, yeah.
Which makes Abram's eventual conversion even more incredible.
All right, so picture this. A world that's lost its way, right?
Okay.
Deeply involved in idol worship, especially the moon.
In a major city like Ur,
And here comes this dramatic turn.
what happens?
God reaches out to Abram,
Wow.
And the source actually calls him a converted moon worshiper.
Highlighting the huge change he went through.
Oh, yeah, a complete transformation.
And then think about the weight of God's command in Genesis 12:1.
Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you.
Now, back then, in the ancient Near East,
Yeah.
your identity, it was so tied to your family, your community, your land.
It was everything.
Everything. So to just leave all that behind,
You'd need some serious faith.
a monumental leap of faith.
Uprooting your whole existence.
And it's interesting, the text doesn't actually say how God revealed himself to Abram.
It does say that it could have been through dreams, which is how God sometimes communicated with people outside the direct line of promise in early Genesis.
Oh, that's right.
And it's also important to remember that Abram is descended from Shem, one of Noah's sons.
So there's this connection back to the promises after the flood.
Right. God's plan is unfolding.
It's not starting from scratch with Abram.
Now let's get to the core of this.
Okay.
The promises
A foundation.
God makes to Abram right at the beginning, Genesis 12, 2, and 3.
Right.
First, the promise of land, to the land that I will show you. And later it's specified as Canaan.
Right.
To your offspring, I will give this land.
Now, it's key to remember that the Canaanites were already living there.
That's right.
So God isn't saying, here's the land right now.
Yeah.
It's more like, this is for your descendants. It's their inheritance.
The second promise is about offspring.
I will make of you a great nation.
And remember, Sarai couldn't have children.
Right. So there's this tension.
How can he have a nation if he has no kids?
Exactly. And later on, this promise expands to include his descendants becoming many nations with kings.
And then the third major promise, maybe the most far-reaching.
The blessing.
I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed.
Wow.
This isn't just about Abram or his family. It's about blessing everyone.
This is huge, universal.
And these three promises, they form the basis of what we call the Abrahamic covenant.
Right, the second major covenant in Genesis after the one with Noah.
And sources emphasize that God's part of the covenant was unconditional.
Once it was established, it was set.
Even though Abram had to respond in faith and obedience.
It's all about God's commitment.
And we also see other promises that develop as this covenant relationship goes on.
Like protection for Abram and his descendants.
And God saying that he will be their God.
A deep, multifaceted agreement.
So Abram's got these incredible promises in front of him.
What does he do?
The text says, so Abram went, as the Lord had told him.
Wow, just like that.
He was 75 years old when he left Haran.
Think about that.
Starting a new life in a new land at that age.
That's amazing.
And he doesn't go alone. Lot goes with him and Sarai and all their possessions.
Right, and the people they had acquired in Haran.
It's a huge undertaking.
Moving their whole world.
So their journey takes them into Canaan, specifically to Shechem.
To the Oak of Moreh.
And it's there that God reaffirms the promise of the land.
That it would be given to Abram's offspring.
And then Abram does something really interesting at Shechem.
What's that?
He builds an altar. Now think about this. Canaan was full of Canaanite gods.
These strange deities, part human, part animal.
Right, often associated with fertility.
So Abram building an altar to the God who called him.
Yeah.
That's a statement.
A public declaration.
He's saying, this is who I follow.
He's planting a flag for his faith.
I love that analogy.
Then he moves south to the hill country east of Bethel, which was originally called Luz.
Okay.
And what does he do?
Builds another altar.
He builds another altar and calls upon the name of the Lord.
This could be him worshiping.
Yeah.
Or proclaiming his God to everyone around him.
So think about the contrast here. Humanity at the Tower of Babel trying to make a name for themselves.
Through their own efforts.
And here's God promising to make Abram's name great.
It's divine grace.
It's God taking the initiative.
Our source really highlights that God's reaching out to Abram was pure grace.
Abram didn't earn it.
He was a moon worshiper, remember?
Right, in a world consumed by idolatry.
The Hebrew word hen, the Greek word charis.
Yeah.
They both capture this idea of unmerited favor, God's kindness and love that we don't deserve.
And that promise to bless all peoples, that's central to this covenant.
Absolutely.
But it's interesting that the how of that blessing, it comes much later in the story.
It's a thread that runs through the rest of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
And just to give you a sense of time, our sources place these events in Abram's life around 2000 BC.
Okay.
Which we can connect to things like Solomon's reign and the Exodus.
So we're talking about ancient history here.
The very roots of a story that still resonates today.
All right, let's recap what we've covered today.
Yeah.
We've seen Abram's journey from moon worship in a sophisticated city to following the one true God.
Leaving everything behind.
We've looked at those foundational promises,
Uh,
the land, descendants, and the blessing for all people.
Amazing promises.
And we've witnessed that first act of faith, leaving his home and stepping into the unknown, trusting God's word.
What I find really powerful to consider is the sheer amount of faith Abram needed to do that.
Yeah.
To leave everything he knew based on a promise of something he couldn't even see.
So this brings up an interesting question for everyone listening.
What's that?
Where in your own life might you need a similar leap of faith?
What are you holding on to? What's keeping you in your comfort zone?
Are there values, commitments, maybe even a sense of calling that you're overlooking?
Because it means stepping outside of what you know.
Think about the nature of belief, the impact of leaving your comfort zone,
And the power of promises.
both those we receive and those we make.
It's a lot to think about,
It is.
but it's worth it.
It definitely is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Take care.
Bye.